Hey, everybody, my name's Zach, and I am an alcoholic. Good to see all your beautiful faces and names, and congrats to everybody who just took time. It's really amazing for me to be here. Ross, I appreciate reaching out, asking me to share here tonight. Yeah, this is really an honor. It's huge because, for me, hearing another alcoholic story is what made me stay in the rooms when I first showed up to a meeting. So just having the chance to give back in the way A showed me by sharing my experience, strength, and hope is it's awesome. It's really awesome. So my sobriety date is August 6th, 2017. I have a sponsor, has a sponsor, has a sponsor, and I worked all 12 steps, and it's changed my life for the better. So I'm going to do what A's taught me to do. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about what it was like for me, what happened, and what it's like now. So I live in San Diego, California now, but I grew up on the south side of Indianapolis in a little town called Greenwood with a big Irish Catholic family, with the only two parents in the family that didn't drink, believe it or not. And growing up, I was always kind of a quiet kid for a while until I wasn't, until I learned to become the class clown to, get attention. But I always kind of, felt awkward, felt a little bit different. And I remember, pretty much being obsessed about alcohol as soon as I found out what alcohol was. Like my aunts and uncles always drank at family gatherings. I can remember, I don't know, probably as young as like 7 or 8, like me and my cousins trying to sneak into my grandpa's garage to steal beers. Like, the idea of alcohol gripped me pretty quick. First time I really ever got super drunk, I think I was like 14 maybe, and we had a half day at school. My parents were working. Me and my buddy broke into my mom's liquor cabinet. Really, the next thing I remember is waking up Saturday at like noon, passed out, covered in my own puke on my bathroom floor, and yelling at my mom, like, why didn't you wake me up for football practice? Like, like it was her fault or something. And she's like, well, you were drunker than a skunk, you idiot. I'm like, no, I've never drank, Mom. I don't know what you're talking about. I couldn't wait to do it again. It was shocking, I know. Alcohol was a big part of my family. My mom would have me go with my grandpa to go to like volunteer church, and I think probably, again, as young as like probably 10 or 11, he started sneaking me a beer or two afterwards. And it was like always the most exciting thing for me. I couldn't wait to go help grandpa at the church again because I knew I'd get a couple beers afterwards. It didn't take long before I started getting in trouble drinking. And all that did for me was make me better at hiding it. I didn't realize until I got sober, but I got so good at telling lies to people because I would convince myself they were true. And if I believed they were true, there was no way you weren't going to believe it. So, that was a real tough thing for me to start to break once I, started doing the deal here. And jumping forward a little bit, when I got out of high school, man, like there was nothing I wanted to do besides party. My first year of college, I went to class probably the first semester. Next thing you know, I'm in a full alcoholic depression, dropping out second semester. That's when I had my first suicide attempt. I really just didn't understand the point of life, man. Like I couldn't figure it out. Like existence for me just felt really heavy. All the monotonous things that you have to do on a regular basis, like feed yourself, bathe yourself, like figure out what the hell you're going to do with your time. Like it all seemed like way too much. And all I wanted to do was get fucked up. I won't spend too much time on the mess, but like my early 20s became the succession of me either finding a job or getting into a school and then, doing okay for a few months or, 2, 3, 6 months and then screwing it all up. The whole time just trying to maintain as good a face as I could for my family and, the people I think who had expectations of me while still trying to party the way I wanted to. And I remember pretty frequently I'd end up sitting on my back porch talking with my dad, and he would ask me the same question, which was, how the fuck did we get here again? It's like you've burned your life to the ground again. You screwed up this thing that we tried to help you get into. What are you doing, man? Like, what the hell are you doing? And so I don't know. Eventually I got tired of that. I got tired of, feeling like I was a failure. I decided to move out to San Diego, decided to move to California. I pulled, classic geographic, to me in my head at the time, it was like, oh, I'm going to go start a new life and there's gonna be all these cool opportunities. I into yoga at one point trying to find answers, and I knew there was more of that here in California than Indiana, and so I moved out here and life was really great for a while, right? Like I had way more access to drugs than I ever had before. There was all kinds of stuff out here available you couldn't get in Indiana, and it was so much easier to find. lived in a hostel for a while, lived in my car for a while, went through a series of roommates that all happened to be drug dealers, which was interesting because it wasn't a criteria I was looking for. But, they say like like attracts like. I always somehow seemed to find roommates that were drug dealers where I'd be able to get stuff for free or cheap. It was really convenient at the time. I was pretty darn proud of myself. And then eventually I got to this point, man, where I realized that rent was really expensive and drugs kind of expensive, and maybe I should just go live in a van. And so I did. I was at, ironically, what we called Thanksgiving, where we had a Thanksgiving dinner where everything had weed butter in it, high out of my mind. And I found this other guy who'd been living in his van and he wanted to move to Hawaii. So he sold me his van for $800. It had a Tempur-Pedic mattress in it. Man, I thought I was going to be set for life. I think that was where I started to really get my first taste of pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. Believe it or not, when you go to bed by yourself in a van and you're having to try to find a parking spot where you're going to feel safe, like it's pretty freaking scary, man. And I lay in that van at night, hitting my bowl, trying to find a pint or something rolling under the thing just to get myself right so I could go to sleep. They talk about in the big book how alcoholics are pretty smart. We all tend to be a little bit smarter maybe than the average person, a little bit more clever, a little bit more tricky, a little bit more adept at getting what we want because of that, that craving that we have. So I was always really good at finding people who wanted to help me, right? I knew how to play the role of the victim or play the role of like the bird with the broken wing, right? Like help me out. I found some people to kind of get me back on my feet. Some friends that I had worked with early on when I moved to California, they helped me get out of the van. We ended up moving into an apartment together, me and a couple of my best friends. We got matching tattoos together. Like life was grand again, right? It was there where I ended up getting sober. I don't know how you guys feel about talking about drugs at this meeting. I realize I've already talked about them a lot. If I knew at the time that AA old timers didn't want to hear about drugs, maybe I wouldn't have done them. Yeah, bullshit, right? So living there, me and my buddy ended up getting into a real bad cocaine habit. He made a bunch of money. We had a bunch of friends in town who were coke dealers. One of them was my old roommate. And I got to this point where every time we were out at the bar or something, I would follow him to the bathroom. First, he told me to, and then eventually it got to the point where I was just following him, expecting him to give me bumps in the bathroom. And that's when I first started to realize, like, okay, maybe I'm not a person anymore. I've literally become this dude's like puppy dog, and it didn't feel good. After my 27th birthday, me and him had this huge bender. 3 days, no sleep, cocaine binge. And I woke up Monday morning. My cousin, who I'd been working for at the time, had shut off my email for my company. He had shut off my company phone. And this is a guy who had gone out of his way a lot to help me out. When I was back in Indiana through my cycle of screwing things up, when my parents kicked me out for drugs, he had taken me in. He had actually been on parole at the time because he has his own issues with drugs. He had taken me to some AA meetings. He had asked me to come, to support him, right? It was the good old trick of like, hey, man, I'm nervous going to this meeting. Will you come support me? And, me being the good cousin, of course, I said yes. That last time he had hired me when I was fired right after that big birthday weekend, I had swore up and down I would never screw him over again. The last 2 times he had fired me, I'd screwed him over. I'd gotten lazy. I decided I just didn't feel like working, right? And really what it was, I was too fucked up to think. But waking up that morning and realizing that I had made all these promises. I had, swore up and down how I'd be better this time. And he's somebody who knew what it was like to get in trouble with the things that I got in trouble with. And he had stuck his neck out for me. And knowing that I had let him down, man, it crushed me. Like I felt like the biggest piece of shit in the world. I really did. You guys know what that feels like. I had it. I had that full on pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. I spent that next day like a zombie, like literally like bouncing between my fridge, looking for beers that weren't there, to digging through my carpet, looking for any sort of nug of whatever to smoke or snort or just something to change how I felt. It was kind of my first God shot as I, bounced outside to go smoke a cigarette. I had 2 of my old drinking buddies call me, and they had both gotten sober. They had both gotten sober through the program Alcoholics Anonymous, and neither one of them tried to push it on me. Neither one of them, there was nothing about them trying to tell me what to do with my life. But what I noticed is they both sounded way happier than I had ever heard them. These were people that I drank with in kind of a depressive way. They weren't people I partied with. These are the people I drank with that were like, our lives are so bad, man. Like we'd listen to sad fucking country music and like bitch about the state of existence, right? Like these were those friends. Me being the kind of, selfish, self-involved, self-aggrandizing alcoholic that I am, I always thought I was better than the two of them, right? And so to have them calling me and asking me how I'm doing and telling me how great their lives were, it was like, oh shit, like these losers can do it. I could probably do it too, right? The next day, I got online and I found a meeting near me, and I walked into the room and just kind of like I'm doing now. I heard somebody sharing their story, and it was like, holy shit, somebody finally gets it. I had spent all those years screwing up, trying to figure out what was wrong with me, man. I don't know if you guys have ever done this, but like I spent like hours on like WebMD, like looking up like all the different symptoms of like suicidal ideations and depression and anxiety, and like trying to figure out like what was wrong with me. And when I walked in that first meeting with like the desperation of a dying man, I was like, holy shit, this is it. Like this is the thing that I have. This is the thing I've been trying to put my finger on my whole life. This is why I feel different. And so I stepped outside of that meeting. I'm smoking a cigarette, bullshitting with people afterwards, and this guy comes running out of the building and he's like, hey man, I got this book for you here. You can just have it. Like, I'm so glad to see you. I'm so glad you're here. Like, take this home with you. Like, read these pages, yada, yada, yada. I'm just like, okay. I was so broken. I was so scared that like, man, I would have taken anybody's suggestion to get me out of the spot I was in. And so I did. And I started reading the book, and it was just like when I was hearing these guys' stories where it was just, they were talking about how I felt inside in a way that like I had no idea that anybody understood that. And it clicked, right? And it took me a while to start to really make a start at this thing. Like I was one of these people that stayed on the marijuana maintenance program for a little while. So I was my first like 90 days of tokens I took, I was smoking weed the whole time because I'm like, I just need to stop doing cocaine. I just need to stop drinking. And then lo and behold, I hit another emotional bottom. A couple of them. I'll share them real quick. So like, I ended up dropping acid with this girl and telling her I loved her, and she started crying, and like I felt like the biggest moron in the world. And then another time, I had finally stopped smoking weed, and then I decided I needed to get clean because I wanted to get a new job because like, right, I'm sober now. Like it's time. It's been a few weeks or a month or whatever. Like it's time to upgrade my life. And so I listened to this guy I worked with who'd been to prison and been on parole, and he knew how to clean your system out. And so I took like half a bottle of niacin. I don't know if you guys would know what niacin is. I ended up in the hospital, man. Like I had my only overdose in recovery. it was terrifying. So like it was a little rocky getting started, but after those experiences, like I need to stop. I really, really need to stop trying to do shit my way. I need to stop trying to hack this thing and just do the steps as these people tell me to. And so I got with my sponsor literally the day after that hospital experience, and he sat me down. He's like, are you willing to do whatever it takes to stay sober? And I could say emphatically and honestly, yes. So he had me start going through the steps. And first step was pretty easy. I think I had enough evidence. He had me write down how I was powerless. He had me write down, how my life was unmanageable. And looking at that list, like it was so evident. It was just so evident. We get to step 2, came to believe. For me, that wasn't super difficult. In all of my, I don't know if you can tell from the beard and the long hair and the painted fingernails, I'm a bit of a hippie. I'd done a ton of psychedelics out here. I always had like kind of spiritual ideas, right? So the idea of a higher power didn't scare me off all that much, as long as it wasn't the higher power I grew up with. I grew up super Catholic, really rejected that. The fact that I knew that from AA that it could be a God of my own understanding, that part wasn't too tricky. And then step 3, man, I really started to feel things change. The point that was made to me was that you've been running your life this whole time, and how has it worked out for you? And I'm like, oh, not good at all. So why don't you just try turning your will over, right? Like you don't have to be perfect at it. None of us are perfect at it. Yeah, I was ready to hand the reins over, and I did that just by continuing to do the steps and continuing to take the suggestions of people in the program, right? Like, fortunately, I was able to see how easy that was. Is like, as long as I just keep trusting this process, then this is me trying to do my higher powers will. Yeah, I hit my knees with my sponsor. I said that third step prayer, like I humbled myself. Hitting my knees was definitely something I didn't like doing because, growing up Catholic, to me, I had associated it with that. But, I was willing to do whatever it took. I told him, I promised him I was willing to do whatever it took. So I did. And it really shifted things. It really did. I could just feel this weight of the responsibility of my life kind of taken off of me. And so I started with step 4. That was an interesting experience. I feel like a lot of people really get stuck on step 4. Like, you can really hesitate or procrastinate doing it. And I'd say all said and done, mine probably took a couple months. But the thing that, the old timers in my men's meetings always share that has kind of rang true with me is like, your 4th step can take 2 hours. It can take 2 hours and 2 days. It can take 2 hours and 2 weeks. It can take 2 hours and 2 months, or 2 hours and 2 years, or 2 hours and 2 decades. But once you actually sit down and commit to doing it, it can take just a couple hours, right? And I did find that, once I actually committed to doing it, I was able to get most of that stuff out. It was yucky, man. Like sitting through those feelings was tough, but also it gave me that chance to work through it. And so for step 5, that took some time. Me and my sponsor sat down, I think 3 nights, and it probably took 5 hours at a time to actually get through my whole list, which is not how I wanted it to go. I wanted to just sit there and read it okay, Joe did this to me and I hate him, and Sally did this to me and I hate her. And I just wanted to rattle them off and just blurt it all out, and then just get it done. And he's like, whoa, 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 back up. Let's go back to Joe here at the top of the list. What happened here, right? And so we really broke down what was going on with me emotionally, where I was coming from, my part in the situation. Where was I inconsiderate? Where was I dishonest? Where was I selfish? I know some people say they get this huge feeling of the weight lifting off of them or whatever. That wasn't quite the experience for me with the 5th step. I felt pretty emotionally drained after that. But I did have a big realization that still impacts me every day to this day. And it's the fact that has driven me to do a lot of the stupid shit I've done, or driven me to step on the toes of my fellows, is this deep-seated feeling of not being good enough. Most of the time I had a resentment against somebody, it's because I blame them for making me not feel good enough. Or whenever I did something crazy over the top to either get attention or to take something that I wanted, that often it was just me trying to prove to the world that I was good enough. And once I realized that, moving forward, when I would pause when agitated and do the things that I've been taught to do here, I can look at that and say, okay, is this lie that I believe that I'm not good enough driving this? Because ultimately, my sponsor told me, you were made perfect, man. Even through all your alcoholism, you're doing the best that you could with what you knew at the time. And all you can do now is to continue to do that. You're more than good enough, and your experience is going to help somebody else. Yeah, getting through 5, 6 and 7. I know the book is super short about. I went through it with my men's group. We did a little book called Drop the Rock, which is not AA approved literature. I know that, I will say that, but highly recommend it. When you guys go through 6 and 7, it was very helpful. Getting ready to have God remove my defects of character and becoming willing to have them remove all that stuff. To me, that's it ties in with 12, right? I do that on a daily basis, right? I try to recognize when my defects of character come out, and I try not to let them come out, right? Rocking through the steps. 8, 9, only thing I'll say is that first amends I made was terrifying. And once you get that first one out of the way, you can realize that, people are pretty accepting. Step 11 has probably been one of the most powerful things in my life. Because prayer and meditation helped get me out of my own head. And same with step 12, when I go to try to talk to another alcoholic, turn my focus and attention for me onto somebody else. My problems just don't seem as big. From being the perpetual fuck up in my almost 5 years of recovery, I've been able to get back into school. Yeah, I've spent like the last like 3.5, 4 years doing community college. I'm now in San Diego State. I'm a year done with the nursing program. I've like found some purpose in a direction in my life where I can help people. I've really stepped into myself. Like I'm doing all the things that I always wanted to do that I never thought that I was either worthy of or could afford because drugs and alcohol are expensive. But I mean, I have an amazing group of friends. I got involved with White Paw. Actually, my friend Bones, who knows Ross, suggested that I come in and do this meeting tonight. He's one of the best friends I've ever had. I mean, just like true blue, like would die, do anything for me. Like the people in my life are absolutely incredible in this program. Well, last week, like we went and did H&I at this like youth treatment center, and it was amazing. I had to talk to these like 16, 17-year-old kids about our journey in recovery. It was incredible. But really, like the biggest thing for me, I will never undervalue again that this program has given me is a sense of peace with myself and a sense of serenity where kind of no matter what happens, because life still happens, I just know everything's going to be okay, right? Like I have a trust in a higher power, the higher power that led me to these rooms, that led me into recovery, that has somehow kept me sober all this time. I still look at who I was. It's absolutely a miracle going through what I've gone through in this program. Like I know ultimately everything's going to be okay. I have a really simple purpose, and I call it the primary purpose. As long as I stay sober, and I try to carry the message of hope that was given to me to other alcoholics, the rest of life figures itself out. I thought that was bullshit when my sponsor said it to me, but I've been doing it for almost 5 years and it rings true, right? As long as I'm sober and I'm trying to help other alcoholics, literally everything else ultimately does figure itself out. If you're new, I stick around, ask questions. You're going to meet great people here, and ultimately you'll find peace, man. So yeah, again, thanks so much, Ross, for having me come and speak tonight. And I will turn it back over to you, my friend.